More wrenching, sadly. The forest car, the rust monster as I've started calling it, all of a sudden one day had no spring on the right side. It was just sitting there super low. I have no clue when it broke. If it broke just as it was parked or if the spring snapped where it was just sitting. I don't know, it doesn't matter. It needs to be fixed if it's gonna be used anymore. So, front end was lifted up with the tractor, put some wood under there, some support. Here you can see the broken, it's a torsion bar that acts as a spring on these Nissan pickup trucks. And I found that the other side, the bolts on the hub had started coming undone, so they were unbolted and put Loctite and tightened back up. On the other side they had loosened to the point that the threads were toast and needed to be taken apart and put some helicoils, but that's not the main part of the video. A little sidetrack. Here is the tensioning bolt for the spring. Put the wire wheel up there and removed some rust on the threads and sprayed everything. I started spraying things as soon as I knew we were gonna take this apart, but still it needed some force and some heat to get some of the things off. There were 3 bolts holding the front mount for the torsion bar, and it's rusty down there. This car has been in a mine at most of its life, I think. So it's a bad environment for machines. Did not feel like the 2 smaller bolts wanted to give up easily either, so added some more heat to them also, and then I made sure to have just a 6-sided socket, not a 12.1. Makes it grip a little better, and a fixed tool to put some force into it. The broken part, the stump needed to be cut away to be able to get the tensioner out of the frame. My dad had welded on a piece of steel onto the rod itself, and we did try to force it out of the I loosened the bolt, but I tightened them back up, and we did try to see if we could get the torsion bar out of the front mount directly, but that did not want to go. Also started working on, there is kind of a plate that stops the bar from going too far into the tension. Here we had changed the decision to actually remove the front mount also, and that came apart a lot easier then. Took some measurements for the length of the bar, trying to source a new one. Kept working on getting that stop plate from out of the tensioner. The bar was cut, some pipes, and a big drift was used. Here it's actually in the front mount, some heat was added, and then serious force on the anvil, and it started to move, luckily. So even if things are rusty, we could probably reuse most of the things. It was a little bit tricky to source a new spring also. Yeah, the tensioner, same thing, quite hot, and then start punching it. But luckily, while we did research and get hold of a new spring, I received some more plants, so we could spend a few days with that. I will never be without work, that's for sure. Some areas I had to go over again from the last 2 summers, been too hot and dry, so I have gone over them and tried to put a few more plants in where I see they have died on me. So that's a little bit sad, and it takes time and it costs money, but what are you gonna do? And some of the few plants or quite a lot of them have survived. It's not that bad, so but still annoying that you have to look over it. Back to the car. New torsion spring has arrived. Was lucky to source one at a decent price. There are some companies selling some aftermarket things, but a lot more, and you have to buy them as a pair. So then it was about cleaning up the splines in the mounts for it. I did some measurements to see the depth the torsion bar is supposed to be put in there. Made some marks to ensure that I got it to the proper depth compared to where it was at. When I was happy with the I put some grease on there, thought it was gonna go easier, but it did not. It needed more cleanup, so put it in the vise and use a screwdriver to scrape away some of the rust. Took some time, but this one didn't have to be that easy to get on and off. Some gentle tapping and it was in place. The other end we were quite certain we would have to move around to get the proper tension. So this one I wanted to have easier to get on and off. Needed to weld in a new stop for it since I had removed the plate to be able to use a big drift to force out the stump of the old torsion bar. I just used a bolt in there. It doesn't have to be a plate. Anything that stops it from being able to migrate deeper into it should work just fine. And then here you can see it's a little tricky getting it into the holder for it, but it can get in there if you just wiggle it around in the proper way. Ran into some issues trying to get it in and out once the front mount was bolted into place. Or even before that it was tricky because it has that little lock ring. Did try to tighten it up, or here it was way too tight. I didn't have a reference on how many turns to loosen up the old ones instead had snapped, and I didn't want to bother with starting undoing the other one because that side rusty also. So we just tested and kind of felt our way to the proper place. Moved it a couple of splines. We had to do that two times, move to one spline less. And once we were happy with what we thought was good tension, we decided to lift it down, and if we had to we would lift it back up or just crawl under there and try to sort it out. Tension it more if needed, but with it down on the ground it's a little tricky because there's some plastic fender widener on one side that's missing on the other, so we decided to kind of measure up to the hood to see where we're at, and it might be a little more tension on the passenger side now, about 1 centimeter, half an inch, so should be good enough for what we use it for. That lock clip was put into place. It should maybe have been one spline less, because the bolt might stick out a few millimeters out of that frame thing, but I'm not gonna bother changing anything. A little bit of grease and that rubber cover put back in, so it's up and running.